What is going on, alpha males? Welcome to the Alpha Male Podcast, the podcast where we talk about what it means to be a man the right way, with God at the center, made in His image, strong, dominant, and in control. And we don't apologize for that. Gonna try a different format today. Gonna put the bio in at the end so we can just get into the episode a little bit earlier. I also want to sincerely thank all the listeners that you give me some of your time, and especially thank the patrons who support the podcast. With that, let's get into what we're going to talk about today. Protein prep. Protein storage. Now, we did a whole episode a while ago dealing with meat preservation. If you've listened for any length of time, you'll know that I'm a big-time hunter. Been a professional big game hunter and guide, put meat on the table literally by God's grace since I was a very young man. I'm all about going and slaying a beast and preserving it with or without refrigeration and knowing those skills. Again, we already did a podcast on that, and I know a lot of people, especially with the dynamically changing world that we live in, might want to put up food for their family. In a lot of prepper circles, they talk about beans and rice and corn. And that's stuff I don't generally eat on a daily basis. But it is stuff that I have prepped and stored. Why? Because it lends itself. I think that's one of the reasons we went to that as a staple food. Because it stores for long periods of time, for times of famine. You can store up grain. That's kind of one of the big advantages of it. And although I don't really eat much grain day to day, I'll certainly eat it in the apocalypse. I'll certainly eat it if I don't have any food. That's what I consider it. I consider that kind of starvation rations. But as a man, as an alpha male, and just in general life, you need protein. You need fats. There's no essential carbohydrate. Your body actually can make carbs and other things from protein. You'll die without protein and fat. You will not die without carbs. Gluconeogenesis is a thing. You can look that up if you want. Your body converting protein into other things that it needs. That said, protein is very important, and I think it's left out of a lot of discussion about food prep because it's not as easy, right? You can't just throw, 30 pounds of chicken thighs in a 5-gallon bucket and seal it like you can with corn. But it's very essential, and even for day to day. Inflation, I don't think I have to tell you, is a thing. What did you spend going to the grocery store this month versus 2 years ago? One of the staple things that I eat generally, my most common go-to dinner is 10 eggs. I'll cook 10 eggs. The wife will have one. For years and years, that's been a pretty big staple in my diet. And for years and years, those flats, those 60 eggs, the big flats of eggs, vacillated between 3-something and 4-something a flat for 60 eggs. I just left Walmart and they're $16. And they've been back and forth between $12, $13, $15, now $16. You can say inflation is whatever it is, but that's a staple I've been eating for years, and it's gone from $3 or $4 a flat to $16 a flat. So even if you don't consider yourself a big end of the world prepper, just prepping and buying protein in advance is kind of like giving yourself a raise. Because at the time you're eating it, you bought it for less than if you would have bought it today. That being said, let's talk about eggs. Eggs, as I mentioned, are one of my favorite protein sources. They've got protein, they've got fat, they're fantastic. Contrary to popular belief, you don't need to refrigerate eggs. Now, I'm not telling you for the FDA or that I'm a scientist or a doctor. Telling you that for a long time in lots of places throughout the world, people don't refrigerate eggs. Eggs last a long time without refrigeration. Also, things like wood ash and or just cheap vegetable oil, eggs can last for months without refrigeration. That's a real thing. I think a lot, honestly, of this refrigeration thing is marketing. If you listen for any length of time, you know that I live large stints off-grid. That being said, I don't think eggs need to be refrigerated. Again, I'm not telling you what you should do. I'm just telling you what I do. I've eaten more not refrigerated eggs and raw eggs than I can honestly remember. Never gotten sick from it. What I trust more than refrigeration and expiration dates from who knows who put them on there? The nose that God gave me. Trust me, if an egg is bad, you will know it. I have never seen anybody eat a rotten egg willfully. They're just like, oh, it's rotten and I don't know. If there's a rotten egg, you will know. Because God gave you a nose and they stink. That's how that works. It's the same with meat. If meat is rotten, you will know. I've also eaten plenty of raw, unrefrigerated meat. Never gotten sick from it. I'm not telling you what you should do. I'm telling you what I do. If meat has turned, you will know. I think any culture, any age, old enough to articulate, if you put a piece of rotten meat in front of their nose, they'd say, that's not to be eaten. That's bad. Again, because God gave us a nose. So going back to the egg thing, eggs are where I'm going to start because it's one of my main protein sources. Even now, even at $16 a flat or $14 a flat, wherever you are, for 60 eggs, look at the amount of protein in there. It was nice when they were $3 a flat. It really was. But those days, it's kind of like it was nice when, good American-made 9mm was 11 something a box. Now it's 20 something a box. It is what it is. It's still 9mm, one of the cheapest centerfire pistol rounds. Eggs are still one of the most affordable protein sources. And so eggs, we talked about coating them in oil, we talked about wood ash. So if you have a wood stove or you do bonfires, it's a good way to preserve eggs. You look up how to do that. It's way easier than me trying to explain it on audio for the wood ash thing. But for eggs, literally just put on some rubber gloves or don't and rub them with oil if you want to do the oil thing. Also, powdered eggs are a thing, as they have been for a long time. They're not overly expensive. I don't know if they're any more expensive because when you rehydrate them, obviously a lot of what an egg is water, and the dehydrated ones are much more concentrated. So I don't even know if they're more expensive or not. They may be cheaper. They may be the same price. They're certainly not crazy expensive. Dehydrated eggs, they're a thing. They last a long time. I have some right now in the storage for my food storage. You got some of that stored rice if you have to break into your stored food. Throw some in there, throw some rice in there in a skillet, and you got fried rice. Way more nutritious than just rice. So eggs, powdered eggs, eggs coated in oil. I don't really know if you could break a bunch of eggs and freeze them in blocks. Like dump a bunch of raw eggs in a clean 2-liter bottle or something and seal it and freeze it. I honestly don't know. I wouldn't do that, I don't think, anyway, because if stuff gets really bad, I would not count on having refrigeration. Coating them in oil. Look that up. Do the research for yourself. Look at how people did that for long, long periods of time before the 1940s or 50s when refrigeration was common. Look at people that eat eggs all around the world today that don't have refrigeration. So do your own research on that, but eggs, a good source of protein. Dehydrated milk, likewise, is a thing. It's not crazy high in protein, but it has protein. Condensed milk is different. Condensed milk is mostly sugar. Dehydrated milk, I think, is your best bet for this. Condensed milk, to get off topic a little bit, is probably better if you want a cheap, easy way to give some flavor to food with some nutritional benefit, and it's very calorie dense. It's condensed milk. It's super high in sugar and calories. So if you wanted something that kids might eat, you might mix it with some rice, make a sweet rice dish. You might be able to give it to very young kids, dilute it in water, reconstitute it, whatever you want to call it, in that condensed milk. You could even just give them a spoonful of it as a treat. It lasts a long time. But dehydrated milk, I think, for the protein content is a better bet. Let's talk about even more dehydrated milk protein, and that's just straight whey protein. You can buy the expensive stuff. If you have a grocery outlet, sometimes they have that stuff that's getting ready to expire, like the protein powder. I'm not big on other supplements. A lot of times they shove a lot of other stuff in there that I'm not big on. I'll take protein powder, but I try and stay away from the BCAAs and creatine and all that stuff. I don't like supplements. I don't consider protein powder a supplement. But sometimes that stuff goes on sale. If not, you may have a Winco. I realize moving back east, I guess that's a regional thing because I haven't seen one in Florida. Or something like at a big store like that where they have the big bulk containers. A lot of times I'll have big bulk containers of whey protein. It's not cheap, but if you consider the amount of protein you get per scoop, it's not overly expensive. And if you keep it dry by throwing a hand warmer or something in there, in the container, it should store a fairly long time. And that's just straight protein. So that's a good protein storage source. Now let's talk about a big staple of my diet. It's not pure protein, but it's very high in protein. And that's going to be peanut butter. I mean, peanut butter, right? What else do I have to say? It's awesome. For my birthday, I got 90 something pounds of peanut butter because I wanted a gift that I would use. I wanted something practical. I've bought plenty since then. And I've got one tub of it left, and I'm kind of keeping that as my reserve tub. And like I said, I bought plenty of other jars of peanut butter. I buy it all the time. Again, it's one of my staples. You can get tubs of peanut butter, 30 pounds, 5 gallons, whatever, from restaurant supply stores. Not all peanut butter is created equal. I like peanut butter, as in ingredients. Peanuts. End of story. Peanuts and salt, okay. A lot of times they throw a bunch of other crap in there. Sugar, dehydrogenated rather, whatever that word means. Vegetable oil, stuff that I don't really want in there. You know what peanut butter needs to be good? Peanuts. That being said, peanut butter is not overly expensive. It has gone up a little bit with inflation, but you can still find it pretty affordably. You're talking, I don't know where you live, and I don't know where you're going to listen to this with inflation. Who knows when it blows up again, or with whatever rate. But $2 to $3 a pound for peanut butter. Not only is it a good source of protein, it's a good source of calories. It's not a weight loss food. It's high in calories, if that's what you're worried about. But if you're talking about storage for hard times, it's a great thing to store. Also, if you eat peanut butter, store what you eat and eat what you store. It's a pretty common phrase in the prepper world, right? I certainly eat a lot of peanut butter. And again, the peanut butter I bought 6 months ago, I probably got for a much better price than the peanut butter I'm buying today. Peanut butter. Good source of protein. It's not like crazy high in protein like just straight whey protein is, but it's high in protein. You're talking 7-8 grams per serving. And remember, it's calorie dense. A serving is pretty small. 2 tablespoons has 8 grams of protein. That's not filet mignon, but it's pretty good. It's pretty high in protein. And that's one of the reasons I don't like the peanut butter with sugar in it, because if you look at it as a ratio, you're lowering your protein ratio because they're throwing a bunch of stuff in there that's not protein. Sugars and vegetable oils. Not that I'm against oil. Oil's a great thing to store and prep. You need fat too. But peanut butter's already high in fat. Just cutting down on your protein ratio if you want a high protein food. Try and stick with the peanut butter that's just peanuts, or peanuts and salt. You need salt as well. A lot of Americans eat a lot of processed food and they might get a little bit too much salt in their diet, but if you're like me and you don't eat much fast food, processed food, going out to eat, you don't have that problem and you need salt. You will die without it. So not all protein is created equal. Let's talk about another one. It's probably really common. It's probably a lot of people's main pure protein source. Tuna. Tuna's okay. I got nothing against tuna. It's kind of dry and bland. If you want, in my opinion, the more alpha male version of tuna fish, get you some sardines. Sardines are awesome. They got way more flavor. Rich, manly flavor. Sardines are awesome. We've been talking about this in the Patreon chat for a while, which is why I thought I should do a episode on it about ways to store protein. If you want to be part of a really cool insider chat that I'm blessed to be a part of, consider becoming a patron. There should be a link in the show notes. Anyway, on sardines. If you don't like sardines, maybe reconsider. They're awesome. And there's a lot of different flavors. If you need to get the mustard ones at first or the hot sauce ones at first, go ahead. And if you're talking about something to eat day to day, those are delicious. If you're talking about storing them, I would really look at getting the ones in olive oil. A lot of times they're the same price. And again, talking about high calorie foods, you're talking about storing stuff. If it takes the same amount of size, you're probably going to want the highest calorie version you can get because you can store more calories in a smaller area, especially if it's the same price. It's kind of a no-brainer. And olive oil is really good for you. Talking about a lot of people store grains, well, you get a cup of rice, you boil it up. That's starvation rations. You get a cup of rice and you dump a can of sardines and olive oil on it, and that's a meal. And that oil is really going to do a lot to help aid in the flavor of that food. Olive oil is delicious anyway. Sometimes you can save that olive oil and cook with it if you don't want all the olive oil on the sardines at the time. If you don't just want to drink the olive oil, which is delicious, by the way. But sardines, you get the bones, you get the calcium, you get a lot of other stuff in the fish. There's other options. There's mackerel. Canned mackerel is a thing. Fillets, like canned fish fillets, herring fillets are a thing. And I like those too, just for variety. However, just straight sardines, the cans are awesome. The cans last a really long time. They're a good, convenient size. A big chunk of my big bug out bag is cans of sardines and olive oil. Why? They're delicious. They're easy to eat. They're high in calories, they're high in protein. They're a pretty decent serving size. There's a lot going for them. Got peanut butter, got sardines and olive oil. That's some pretty good high density calorie food. And in my opinion, far better than the really expensive dehydrated prepared meals that a bunch of companies will try and tell you that you need. And I don't have to cook them. I don't have to cook peanut butter. I don't have to cook sardines. I can just open them and eat them. I have a hand, then I can eat my sardines and peanut butter. Not that I'm opposed to making fire. In a lot of situations, I really like making a fire, but maybe you don't have the time to make a fire, or maybe it's not a permissive environment, meaning making a fire could get you killed. So sardines, peanut butter, awesome prep food. Again, tuna is fine, but tuna is usually just the muscle tissue. You don't get any of the ligaments or the tendons or the bones. I like that. I like the crunch of the bones. I like the flavor of the sardine. But if you're only going to eat tuna, then get tuna. I'd give you the same advice. They make tuna that comes in oil, especially if it's the same price. A lot of times it goes on sale. Get that tuna in oil if you have to when it goes on sale. That's a good source of affordable protein. Let's talk about what I would consider some of the really expensive kind of choices. But if you're balling, if you don't care, you're a champagne and caviar kind of apocalypse guy, beef jerky is expensive, especially for the amount of weight of food you get for the price. It's crazy expensive. And also, look at a lot of beef jerky. Most beef jerky has a crazy amount of sugar in it, like a candy amount. Like, I wouldn't eat it unless I was actually starving and in a survival situation. It's not healthy. It's covered in like brown sugar and all kinds of preservatives. I did a whole episode again on meat preservation. You can make your own jerky. You don't need a fancy dehydrator. You need to kill an animal and you need an oven or a fire. That's all you need. People have been preserving meat and making jerky like that for thousands of years. Also, biltong. Not to get off topic, I already did an episode, but biltong is amazing. It's like jerky for the alpha male. It's like jerky the size of a deck of playing cards. Or even bigger if you want. Biltong is awesome. But beef jerky is really expensive. A lot of it's got a bunch of crap in there that you probably don't want or shouldn't eat. Again, if it's a survival situation, whatever. But a lot of beef jerky I would consider candy. Probably got more sugar in it than protein. If you don't believe me, go flip over a bag of common beef jerky and read it and see how much sugar it has versus protein. That being said, it does have protein. If you want to store that, you can. The other one, and I would consider this short term, protein bars. Good ones that are mostly protein. Because a lot of the things they tout as like a protein bar, like a Cliff Bar high in protein, again, they probably have more sugar than protein. Go look at them for yourself. But I consider Quest to be like the cream of the crop or the protein of the crop. They're usually really high in protein. They don't have a lot of extraneous superfluous sugar and a bunch of other junk in there. And in my experience, if you store protein bars for a really long time, they get rock hard. Which is not a big deal, but generally I consider those a short-term option. And they're pretty expensive. I use them as like a meal replacement. They're $2 a piece, which is not cheap, but if I'm running around all day and I need protein, I should say I want protein because I'm trying to build muscle, I can live a long time without food, and so can almost anybody listening without any kind of crazy medical condition. But I want protein because I want to build muscle. The $2 for a protein bar is way more affordable and way healthy than trying to get something out. Even something might be at the gym, the same protein bar might be $4 or $5. That being said, I don't consider them cheap and affordable, but these are more expensive options if you want to store protein. The big advantage is they're convenient. You can just open them and eat them. Little pro tip on these: if you're going to get them in some kind of warm climate, they're going to be in your car, get the ones that don't have the outer like frosting coating or whatever they call it. Just get the plain ones like the cookie dough Quest bars or the cookies and cream Quest bars or something like that. They tend to do a lot better in the heat. Ones with the coating, you open them up and the coating's just melted all over the wrapper. They're just a mess. So if you're in a cold weather environment, it doesn't really matter. If you have options, get the ones, if you're trying for the protein, get the highest protein to calorie ratio. That's what I will do a lot of the times. I'll tell you, in the Quest ones, the highest one that I found is the birthday cake one. I think, unless there's one I don't know about, it has the highest protein to calorie ratio. And there's all kinds of other protein products. There's protein cereal, there's protein chips. I don't know how feasible those would be to store, but they do exist. So again, if money is not an option for you, you want to store a bunch of that stuff, it would be expensive, but you could certainly do it. In In my experience, though, the protein bars, they're a short-term storage, a couple of months, and you cycle through them. If you eat them all the time, not a big deal, because you just eat the older ones, buy newer ones. We talked a lot about peanut butter. Why? Because peanut butter is cheap. One of the really cool discussions we had on Patreon chat again was, if all nuts cost the same price, which one would you get? Now, peanuts are generally, let's say, $2 a pound. And don't hold me to that. Wherever you live might be different. Whenever you're listening to this with inflation might be different. But let's say $2 a pound. Something like a Brazil nut might be $10 or $12 a pound. But if they all cost the same, nut or legume, you don't have to email me and tell me what a cashew is. A nut or legume, right? If you could have cashews or pecans or something like that, almonds, what would your favorite nut be? Peanuts are not the only option. They're generally the most affordable option, and most nuts have very similar properties. They're high in fat, they're high in protein, they store a long time. If you can get some on sale, or again, you don't really care about the price, almonds are awesome. Almonds really last a long time. From what I understand, like Bedouins and nomadic cultures in the Middle East, almonds are one of their staple foods because they have fat, they have protein, they're high in calories. They're a good option. They're just more expensive, usually several times more expensive than peanuts. We talked about peanut butter. You can also store the peanuts. They're cheapest with the shells, so if space is not an option, you can get a lot of peanuts in shells fairly cheaply. Obviously, you have to shell them and stuff like that before you can eat them. They take up more space. Peanut butter is going to take up a lot less space. But hey, if space is not an option for you and you're looking for something to do in the apocalypse, shell a bunch of peanuts. But there's a lot of other nut options that are really good options. They're just more expensive. But almonds, pecans, cashews, Brazil nuts, they're phenomenal in their natural state and ability to store energy and protein. Another one you may not think of often, sunflower seeds. And I'm not talking about the little teeny ones you buy at like a gas station that taste like dill pickles or whatever. Those can be fun if you want. I'm talking about big bulk like you would get at a store that sells bulk food. The black oil sunflower seeds. They're a lot of times really affordable and really calorie dense, and they have protein. They're going to have more protein than a lot of other plant-based foods. So maybe you want to look into that. We talked about some of the big staples for prepper food, rice and corn and things like that. Beans are another staple. Beans are higher in protein. I don't think that protein from beans is at all equal to like an animal-based protein, but it is some protein. Looking for something like that, maybe corn that's higher, not high, but higher in protein, and beans, you might want to lean more towards that than rice and something else. There's a lot of other seeds and stuff like that that are high in protein you might want to look into, again, depending on price and where you are. Maybe in some places, I'm very blessed that people listen to this from all over the world. Maybe where you are, like quinoa is cheaper, or chia seeds are cheaper than peanuts. For me, that's not the case. I just usually will get peanuts. Have about the same nutritional value, and they're way cheaper, so why not go with those? Plus, they're delicious. But anyway, check where you are, but a lot of seed-based plant material is going to be higher in protein because the nature of nature, right? Seeds are meant to last a while. They're meant to not decompose right away. Like spinach has protein, but it's going to be hard to store. Maybe canned spinach. Not just growing spinach and storing it. That's one of the reasons, again, historically, I think we grew grain because we could grow it and it would store. It was a source of calories in the winter in that dearth where you may not have a ton of natural foods or better foods. The game has migrated away. The mastodons, the red stag, the elk, the white-tailed deer have moved out of your area or something like that for the winter. It's just simply too cold to be outside without risking your life. Grains were an easy way to store up calories. But with all the different foods we have now, you have some better options for storing up foods with protein. Anyway, I appreciate you guys listening. I'm going to throw in the tactical verse of the day. You'll know I usually throw in a tactical tip first, but I'm going to put the bio in and then the tactical tip at the end so that if you want to stop after the verse, I don't want anybody to miss the verse. If you want to cut it short because you've heard the bio before and don't care, that's fine. I am humbled that you've listened thus far. From 1 Peter, shepherd the flock of God, which is among you, serving as overseers, not by compulsion, but willingly, not for dishonest gain, but eagerly, nor as being lords over those entrusted to you, but being examples to the flock. And when the chief shepherd appears, you will receive the crown of glory that does not fade away. Shepherd the flock, men. Be good shepherds. With that, I'm going to put in the bio and then the tactical tip. So, who am I? Who is this person talking to you from across the internet? Why should you listen? First and foremost, I am a Christian, a servant of God, and a follower of Jesus Christ. God has blessed me to do many things in my life, for I could do nothing apart from Him. U.S. Marine Corps combat veteran, did a couple of tours in Iraq. As an assaultman after my combat tours, I was an urban warfare instructor for the Marine Corps under Mojave Viper. Also served in the U.S. Army, both full-time and part-time National Guard. Also did several years in law enforcement, LAPD. I worked regular assignments and more specialized assignments. Been a private contractor for a 3-letter government agency. That's all I'll say about that. Been blessed to be a state rifle and pistol champion and West Coast regional rifle champion. Won more shooting competitions with the talent that God's given me than I can actually remember. Was blessed to be the commander of a tactical team in a large metropolitan area. Our primary job, the reason we primarily existed, was to stop active shooters. I got the opportunity to head up and be the commander of that team. I grew up around guns, hunting and shooting and competing at a very early age. Been blessed to hunt all over this beautiful country, from whitetail on the East Coast to mule deer on the West Coast, and bear and elk and all manner of things. I've even been a professional big game hunter and guide. But again, most importantly, I'm a Christian. And I am your host, Michael Melito. Alright, men. The tactical tip of the day. How do you open a can? Well, with a can opener, of course. What if you don't have said can opener? You can do it with like a hammer and a chisel if you have a hammer and a chisel. But if you have a hammer and a chisel, it's likely that you have a can opener. If you have a tool shed, you're going to be able to find a can opener. You could do it with a knife and a rock. Certainly possible. Hopefully that's not your go-to, survival knife, because you might spend a long time resharpening that blade after driving it through a steel can. But you can do it that way with a knife and a rock, and I would also submit maybe a little bit more dangerous. There's an easy way, alpha males, to open a can if you don't have a can opener. Even if you don't have a knife. You should have a knife, as a man, I think, on you. But you don't need it to open a can. You can flip it over. The top of most cans has that lip, and you can rub it back and forth on concrete. Just a piece of sidewalk concrete or steps or a concrete floor in a building. You'll know when you're getting through because you'll see liquid, assuming whatever's in the can is liquid. It usually has some liquid in it. Will start to come out on the concrete. You spin that can around, whatever, 90 degrees, 180 degrees. The way your muscles work in your body rotation, you'll probably wear one side before the other. But once it gets all the way cut through, you can just pop the lid off. And what's really cool is you can usually pop the lid back on if you don't want to eat it all right away. Turning a can upside down and rubbing it on that. If you're somewhere completely off grid and you find a can and there's no concrete anywhere, you can do it with a flat stone. Usually stones aren't completely flat, but you can do it that way. But concrete, it's really porous, it's really abrasive. It doesn't take very long to turn over an average can and rub it back and forth vigorously on concrete to open that can. Might want to go out and try it, just to have the practical application skill of doing that. With that, goodshepherdtraining.com. If you want to contact me, go to goodshepherdtraining.com. Anyway, men, thanks for listening and have a blessed day.